like this when you're 25 and to see these results, it's an extraordinary burden to bear, I know sometimes too. So would you be willing to share with us like one of the hardest things you've had to deal with during your time at Nomi?
Sure. Hardest thing would be last year, actually, this time. I got a call the beginning of September from our program manager in India that one of our trainees' daughter, who was 10 years old, her name was Manisha, was found dead, and also there's suspect of foul play. So that, she had been missing for more than a week, and we've been praying and just really hoping, she just wandered off somewhere. But the reality was that wasn't true. Actually, she was kidnapped from her hut while her mother was at work. Her grandma was watching her, but I guess stepped out. And so when we found out, actually Sarah-Jane happened to be with me, it was a really hard moment. I felt like I failed, and it's hard. Because one person is just too much, and yeah, I'm sorry. So that was a very hard moment this time last year. But it's amazing how things change, and seeing the women that we serve in India and Cambodia, and just their smiles and hope. I've also, been lifted up, in essence, by the results that we're seeing, but also the support of the team and, donors and, customers, and every person matters. And I think overall, like Nomi, the network is very significant in the sense that it's really hard for any person to really battle this issue alone, because it's the epitome of just perversion and, really cutting down a human being in essence. And so for one person to take it out, I think it's just too much. And that's what's the beauty of the network, is that it's not just one person, but it's a whole community. And that's really what the women need in our program, and their children as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and I wanted Diana to share that story, because I think it's so easy to see these kinds of programs and think, oh, it's great, it's making differences, and I think of that story now every time I see a Nomi bag. Like, it's not just a bag. I mean, this represents the potential for somebody's life to change, for their children's lives to change, and yet it's still a battle and struggle every day. It was impossible. Still today, they haven't been able to get an autopsy for the little girl. The report, yeah. I mean, it's very clear that she was brutally raped as a retaliation against her mom getting out, and really building an extraordinary future. And that's the reality of what we have to think about. For me, Diana had asked me to share a little bit with you what drives me, like the day the switch flipped in my head, where it didn't matter how much work I had to do with Baylor, or how much work I had to do for the films I was making, where I would be here, like this morning, or be doing something with Nomi to fight it. And then I'll ask her to sort of share a few closing inspiring words about why we're so hopeful, and why we keep going, and why the future is bright, and why we can end it. It was a very hard story for me. I find my way into fighting human slavery through working on a film. I was brought in to work on the second and third parts of the Nefarious documentary trilogy, and those will release early next year and late next year for parts 2 and 3. I was on set interviewing a friend of Diana's, actually. We didn't know yet at the time. We didn't know each other. His name's Don Brewster, and he's an extraordinary man who was an associate pastor in Sacramento, California, who tried very hard not to leave Sacramento, and his church was trying to set up a program in Cambodia, and they couldn't get anybody to take over. It was a school to help girls transition and to have a different future. So he and his wife ended up selling everything they owned, and they moved to start what is now the Agape International Program in Cambodia. And I asked Dawn, like Diana, what is the hardest thing that nearly made you quit? Like, that literally made you get up and think it's not worth it? Why did you come back from it? And he told me the story of walking through the marketplace one morning, not long after he arrived. And I mean, he told me, Sarah-Jane, you have to understand, this is like a very dirty, noisy, smelly, nasty place. The thought that any of us would even want to take our shoes off, let alone go and find a girl and take her back to a swanky hotel and keep her for a week before we cut her loose and she doesn't even have a family to go back to is unthinkable. And yet American tourists are the #1 consumers of sex trafficking in the world. And Japanese tourists are #2. The sex tourism industry is literally fueled by the United States. So we all have a responsibility to take here. And whether that's in the form of photos that appear in America, and people think that the people are freely deciding to take these photos, they're often not. Often their children are held hostage, and so they can't get out. So Don was telling me the story, and he said that, one day there was an American tourist who, that he later went after and tried to prosecute, who was too anxious to do what he wanted to do to even go back to a hotel. And so he's in one of these little huts on the side of the road, and he leaves one of the girls there when her family's gone to bleed to death on the bed. That's how brutally he has wounded her. And she manages to pull on her PJs and crawl out on her hands and knees into the street. And the first person she sees is Don. And I just remember this man just losing it and crying as he told me this story. And he said, what faith did she have to have in humanity, in all of us, and at that point in man and in our goodness, to throw her arms around his legs and beg him for help after what had just happened to her. And he picked her up, and he said he just it was a blur. It's like when you're in a car wreck and everything goes white, he just remembers it being a blur all around him, and he's running through the streets of Sway Park, carrying her to the hospital. And he got her to the hospital on time. And after very extensive surgery, she lived. Unfortunately, what really got me was that she wasn't 18, she wasn't 14, she wasn't 12. 12's the average age of a human being being traded. She wasn't 10. Anybody getting uncomfortable? She wasn't 8. She wasn't 6. She wasn't 5. She wasn't even 4. She was 3 years old. 3. 3-year-old boys and girls are one of the hottest commodities on the market today. And that's why a program like Nomi, that gets the parents off the street, that gets the kids 3 square meals a day, and gets them in school, is revolutionary. Because you're not just protecting the mothers from being traded. You're protecting the kids. And those 3-year-old kids are in very high demand, and they're worth a lot of money. And I have a little nephew. I don't have kids myself. I have a little dog, Coco Chanel. She's awesome. But I know some of your mothers here, and I know the thought, and fathers, and the thought of your 3-year-old baby being trafficked like that must make you sick. And that's why we all have to do something about it. Whether it's the mica mines or the chocolate or the sex trade, the supply chain, we all have to do something about it. Together we can quash that demand. Every 2 seconds since we've been speaking this morning, somebody has been traded. Every 2 seconds. Many of them that young. So with that kind of thing in mind, Diana, why are you so full of hope? Why are we all so full of hope in this space? And what are we fighting for?
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So Sarah-Jane just illustrated what's called really the ripple effect, really seeing the next generation thrive. But also what we're seeing more and more is women supporting each other. So one of our trainees, Rashawn, she went through our program and had to move out of her very hostile, abusive household and moved her mom and herself. And we built a hut right near in the red light district. And she chose to be in that community because she really saw a need. And we were kind of surprised. We thought she would relocate her hut somewhere else, further away from the red light district. And so by her being there, she met another girl by the name of Rosie, who was trafficked at the age of 15 and is still, right now, I believe, 16, turning 17 years old. And so during the time, Rashawn and our program manager worked very hard to get her out and was able to get her out of the brothel, which was run by her husband. A lot of times, they're married off, thinking that they'll, be in a family, but in essence, they're married into a brothel. And we managed to get her out, and she's in our training program now and has a newborn baby who she decided to name Nomi. So Rosie, she named her daughter Nomi, and we're really seeing just such the major impact even of Nomi, who we visit every year in Cambodia at her shelter. She's now turning 17 years old this October, and has no idea that there's an organization named after her, because she suffers from a bipolar disorder and has never grown development, in terms of her brain-wise, and is very forgetful. So even though we've told her several times, she forgets every time. And we're just seeing, just the impact we're making and the potential to serve thousands of women. And our program, as we've worked with our amazing board, to really narrow down how much it costs per girl. And so per girl, to take them through our 2.5-year curriculum, it's $6,000. And that includes stipend, transportation stipend, the curriculum, as well as a transitional job food. So that's really amazing, seeing what that can really provide. And now we're sending one of our trainees' daughters to college, and so we've donated resources to that as well as that fund, and we're seeing really opportunity. I remember 2 years ago standing at their graduation, which you saw in the video, telling them that, I really see their children becoming doctors, lawyers, accountants, and even the next president, and I could see just their eyes widen and really their smiles also brighten in that possibility, because that's something that they never would have thought. And just really me saying that in that environment has really brought a lot of hope, not only to them, but also to us and to the board, and seeing just the ripple effect in which we're able to partake in.
And it's awesome. And I think by giving up of your time to be here today, I know I always think like an entrepreneur, time is the most valuable resource we have, right? Like money is stuff that we can make more off or lose. Time is something we all have in limited supply. It's one of the greatest investments we can make with our lives. By being here and investing of your time this morning, you become part of that ripple effect. Diana and I could spend the next 30 years of our lives trying to tell 1 million people about why we should end this atrocity. And the reality is that we'd reach 30 million people each. But stories are exponential. And if you're willing to share some of the stories you've heard this morning, if you're willing to share, on your social media, through your organizations, with your friends, the Nomi video, just help raise awareness for the fact that this exists and that we all have to do something about it. If 2 of you today became committed enough to tell 2 people, who would tell 2 people, who would tell 2 people, and you never have to tell anybody else again, you can just tell 2 people, you don't have to start it over, because I don't actually know the mathematics for that. But I have had a mathematician check this. If you go out and tell 2 people until they are so convinced that it's important that they tell 2 people and convince them to tell 2 other people, over those same 30 years, each one of us would reach 2.2 billion people. You can imagine how quickly we reach the face of the planet. That's why we, just by sharing Diana's story, can already help to support Nomi. That's why we, in introducing this discussion with our friends, or hosting lunch and learns, or helping with connections to vendors or whatever it might be, every single little tiny bit that we do gets magnified. From the smell of your morning coffee to your favorite soft cotton tea, or even a text message you send to a friend, all paid for by slave labor, mostly of children. Who would do this? You. Who can end it? You can. I hope that you'll have lots of questions for Diana, and that leaving today, you'll join the fight to say no more. We're in it to end it, and we're in it to end it in our generation. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.